The following are based on true events, according to their authors. I was driving home from work at 2 a.m. I'm a nurse and I live in a small city. The roads were totally deserted and it was a freezing night. I don't live far from work, maybe a couple of miles. I'm driving down a residential street around the corner from my house, and I see a man laying face down in the street. Now remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, great, gotta help this guy up. I was coming off a long shift and falls happen all the time. As I slowed down the car, I suddenly realized what an idiot move that was. I'm a 100-pound woman and I don't carry any weapons. I thought I should do something to help the guy, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man in the road who might need assistance. All of a sudden, I hear a loud bang, bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my locked car. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that there was no man laying in the street. Still on the phone with 911, I screamed, "I'm so scared," to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I quickly told him what had happened, and even though I was right by my house, he told me to keep driving. After a few minutes I had calmed down and he told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in the car. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got off the phone with the dispatcher who told me he was sending a police car to cruise the area. As I gather up my things, I do a final scan of the area and I see the man. He's walking with two other men. I hunched way down in my car until they were far down the road, then bolted into my house. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept towards the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding a huge kitchen knife. I immediately flipped out and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way as I was trying to make him stop. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See, there is nothing to this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife." My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. This happened a couple of years ago when I was backpacking in Australia. I traveled around driving a van like many backpackers there do, as it saves a lot of money with accommodation. I usually slept in the rest areas, gas stations, or wherever I could park. This one night, I've been driving for a few hours and started to feel sleepy. I decided then to stop in the next rest area in the middle of nowhere. Parking in that location during daytime could be a great idea, but at night, it seemed like a horror movie location. There were no cars parked there. I know, I should park where there were people moving around, but I was really drowsy. And no lights whatsoever. I turned off the engine and closed the curtains of the van. It was not long before dawn that I heard some heavy knocking on the side of the van. "Open up, it's the police." Nothing wakes you up faster than that. My heart was racing. I was just adjusting to the adrenaline rush in my system when they repeated the heavy knocking, saying it was the police. My first thought is that I parked somewhere I shouldn't, but then again, it was the middle of nowhere and it was a rest area. I decided to go slowly to one of the windows and look through the gap in one of the curtains. I could clearly see the shape or shadow of a guy standing beside the van. His car wasn't too far, but it didn't have any lights or flashing lights on. This guy was definitely not a cop. Bringing up the courage I had left, I just shouted, "Get the hell away! I have a gun and I'm calling the cops on the radio." Obviously, I didn't have a radio or a gun, but that seemed to faze him. I saw him getting back in his car, and to add to the creepiness, someone came out of the bushes and also got in the car. They left, and a few minutes after that, I turned on my van and drove in the opposite direction they went to. Safe to say that I never slept in another rest area that didn't have at least a couple of other cars parked. I don't know what those people wanted, but with Australia's history of backpacker serial killers, I'm very happy to be here today. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at night made me tired. So one night I wake up to the prickly feeling, like an instinct, just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in a rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. My dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in my mom's arms until my dad comes home and says he saw no one and told us to go to bed. I decided to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister in as to what happened. My dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think I can sleep. Nope, because I noticed a man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear, I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours.